Abalone fishing, diving, rock picking is to search for sea snail, which is a gastropod, and we call it the red abalone. That's the species of it. And you dive for them. They're hidden in rocks. Some are in the open. But they're always submerged, except on a super low tide. And we hunt them out where they live, and we eat them. I wear fins and mask and an expensive suit, wetsuit to stay warm, and we go out to where we think they are, and they're usually around rocks and kelp, and there's too much sand, you won't find any. And we take a few breaths, we dive down, we have large fins, we kick down, clear our ears, and go on down and start searching.
So why do people want to dive for abalone?
That's a personal question, I think, but I think for myself it's an extreme sport. It's like an extreme sport, and I always liked swimming as a child, and I just thought it would be for me, and I talked to an abalone diver years ago, and he told me what he did, and I got all excited and just had to try it. The meat inside the shell is very delicacy. It's high in protein, it's very good for you, it's low in fat, and it's a great thing, and it's a great taste on it that's probably nothing if you haven't had it before. Once you have it, you will absolutely fall in love with it.
Okay, so what are the dangers of abalone diving?
There's quite a few dangers. Number one is you have to be in shape. People have heart attacks to do this. You have to select the right water to go in. You can get out there and not get back in. You wear weight belts, and if you haven't had some training, you've got to shed that belt.
Okay. So what about the sharks?
Well, about the sharks in California, there are sharks in California. There's a lot of great whites here in California, and they are dangerous, and they can eat you, and nobody wants to be eaten.
So have you seen any sharks when you've been diving yourself for abalone?
Have I seen any sharks? Not for diving for abalone. I have seen them spearing fish.
Okay.
But they are out there. They're always out there.
And have any divers been attacked by sharks while abalone fishing?
How many have been attacked by shark divers? There's been quite a few. We've had, of the 125 or so we've had here, probably a third of them are abalone divers, and a third of them are surfers. So it's probably, there's quite a few.
And has anybody died while abalone fishing?
Yes, there's been a few. I know 2-3 people that have died from abalone fishing, yes.
And could you explain a bit more about that, expand on that a bit?
I can explain to you about the one that I know, that I knew the man that died real well, Randy Fry, and he was diving for abalone, and a great white came and snipped his head off. The number one thing to remember while abalone diving is be safe, select the right time to go. That's what causes the problems. So to be safe, you need to select the right water, swell condition to go. Okay.
So could you tell me about the time when you were abalone diving and you encountered the whale?
The time I encountered the humpback whale, yes. That happened 2 years ago. I was diving up north. My wife was on the shore. There wasn't any other divers out there. And I was diving, and all of a sudden surrounded by bubbles, and I started doing somersaults in the water. So something was wrong. I was in about 45 feet of water at the time, and I thought it was a shark. My wife had witnessed the whole thing on shore, and she saw a humpback whale that has a fin. They look like a shark when just the fin's out, and it fluked. It went down and shook his tail evidently, and it sent me flying. It was kind of scary.
So could you explain with abalone diving the actual process? Because most people might think that people dive with tanks on and stuff like that. So could you just talk about how it's actually free diving?
Abalone diving, free diving is what it is. You cannot use scuba tanks. You cannot search for them with scuba tanks and dive. You hold your breath and you go. You use a snorkel, and you're well, but you have to use a snorkel if you want to do it properly. Some people don't, but if you want to do it right.
So how long can you free dive, and what's the average time you are under the water holding your breath?
The average time that I'm under the water holding my breath is completely different than how long I can hold my breath out of the water. I try not to stay more than a minute maybe a little bit over that. I have a watch because you can black out. And on shore, I've held my breath for 5 minutes. So that tells you you got to conserve your oxygen because your femur arteries will suck it out when you're kicking.
And is that one of the major dangers, like blacking out is a common danger when abalone diving?
Blacking out for abalone divers can happen. The people that black out abalone diving are normally the better divers. They know how to go deep, they know how to hold their breath, and sometimes they overdo it. Okay. You don't see too many rookie divers dying of shallow water blackout. The rules on abalone diving are very specific. You have to, they have a lot of rules. You can take 3 a year. They have to be 7 inches. You can't freeze them clean. You have to freeze them in the shell. You can only have 3 in possession in your freezer. You can give 3 to your wife. You can gift them or somebody so you can have 6. But you have to tag the abalone when you get out to show where you got it, what time you got it, what area you got it, and the state tracks them that way. They really enforce that too.
Yeah. So is there a problem with poaching at the moment, abalone, or has there been previously?
Poaching for abalone is a problem. It's been since I've been diving, and that's been nearly 50 years. Yeah. But yes, it's poached heavily. It's an abalone on the black market can probably get up to $300, $100 a pound, and it's poached for restaurateurs, and certain people have to do it. It's been a problem since day one, and it's still a problem. They're trying to they really enforce the rules, so it isn't quite as open as it used to be. Only the professional guys are getting away with it now.
So I've heard, someone told me that abalone is an aphrodisiac. Is that true?
Okay. Some people say abalone is an aphrodisiac. I've heard that before. That could be some reason it's poached. I've eaten a lot of abalone in my life. And I'm very happily married. You can take that one out.
The secret to a long marriage. Become an abalone diver.
You can do what you want to with that one. To stay safe from the sharks while abalone diving, I have read this. Some people don't believe it, but I stay near kelp. There's been very few white shark attacks in kelp. I think there's been 1 or 2, but out of all of them, most of them are in open water. So when I dive, I just make sure I'm near a kelp bed. I'm not locked onto that, but that's kind of how we do it.
Okay. Could you talk about a little bit about trophy diving and explain that?
Trophy diving, yes. Trophy diving is everybody's trying to get the biggest abalone. The biggest abalone in the world is 12 and 5/16 inches, taken by a man named John Pepper. But we trophy dive for abalone that are over 10 inches because there's so much more meat in that size of abalone than a 7-inch size. And it's, I won't say competitive, but it's nice to always have the biggest. Age of abalone, there's nothing completely set on this in stone, but the theory is that an abalone that's 7 inches is between probably about 12 to 14 years old. An abalone that's 10 inches is probably 25 to 30 years old. I read in a book that they think they can go to 50 years. I've never seen that because I don't know how they age them, but the bigger the shell, the older the abalone. The only way to remove an abalone is with what we call an abalone iron. It's highly regulated. They have to be a 1/16 of an inch on the end, so you can't cut the abalone. It can be less than 3 feet. So you dive down and you insert your ab iron. That's what we call an ab iron. We kind of slip it under the meat where we can, under the foot of the abalone, and we pry up. Sometimes it's harder to do than it sounds. The larger the abalone is, the harder it is to get them off because they have more area to suck down on.
Now we should see
is the abalone a sea snail? Yes, it is. It's what they call a gastropod. It has a foot and a stomach, and it grazes. It's just like your garden snail, but they're underwater. Not exactly like them, but they are. It is a sea snail. How many divers are there? Abalone divers. They sell a tag for them every year, and so the state knows now. Years ago, they were selling a lot more, but now there's probably about 21,000 abalone divers this year. We We have to have in our immediate possession is when we dive is a abalone gauge, which is 7 inches. Now other divers will have one. I have one, one for larger abalone, but you still have to have that 7-inch gauge with you, which has to go around the shell, so at the longest point, and that's how you measure an abalone. The different type of abalone seekers are divers that dive in deep water like I do, and you got the shallower water intermediate divers that'll dive under 20 feet, and then you have the rock pickers that on a low tide they can go under a rock and feel an abalone, and if it's an extremely minus tide, the abalone will be exposed out of the water and they can get it, but they're way back in rocks. The biggest abalone that I have ever taken has been just at 11 inches, which is huge. There's only been 150 of those recorded taken. So we've got lots of 10s, but that's the biggest 11. So I would love to find a huge one. I know it's about the end of its line, and I'm about the end of my line, and I want to get it.
Okay.
When I'm dead and in my grave, no more abalone will I crave. On my tombstone will be seen, here lies the body of a diving machine. On the other side shall be wrote, a lot of salt water went down this diver's float. At my funeral the preacher will say, if it hadn't been for the North Coast, he'd been alive today. When my friends and family walk by, they'll stop, look, and ponder why. Deep down in I think I know, because I found God's favorite abalone hole.